but I can look in.
This, but I don't remember what. Now that it's come up, I was kind of wondering, well, how do they go about making that decision? What criteria do they have to look at?
Yeah, I think, from my understanding, and I could be wrong, maybe Bill, Kurt knows, I think the federal requirement is they have to review the current standards.
Yeah.
In that fashion.
From the time is the official legal language, I believe.
But I'm not sure that it sets out specific
Criteria for what, how you make the decision. Huh. Okay. Well, that's
But the thing to remember is California is already, you know, a few years ahead of the EPA on setting this standard. CARB is still looking at, towards the end of next year, setting some kind of lower NOx standard for.
But I don't think they've identified what criteria they'll use to set that level either.
But they have
They have their
they've done a tech assessment.
Alternative low NOx standard, right?
Yeah, but they've done a tech assessment and they're in the middle of rulemaking to try to update that 2010 standard.
So I attended an event last week, the Roush Clean Tech Roadshow, in which they were showing off their medium heavy-duty propane auto gas engine and truck and other formats, school buses and so forth, that was certified by the Air Resources Board at the 0.02 grams per brake horsepower hour NOx emission level, which I was pleasantly surprised to find out that it's not just natural gas that can meet it, but also propane auto gas. So,
Which is safer?
what's that?
Which is safer?
Safer? Well, I mean, there's arguments that propane's better for some reasons because it's a liquid, it's a little easier to deal with.
Better range.
Better range. The natural gas has to be compressed, you know, so I don't know. I haven't thought about, they're both go on the same tanks, right, basically? Do they use the same?
I don't think it's the same tank. The engine's very similar.
The engines are very similar, yeah. I'm not sure. I don't know. I'm sure both industries will tell you theirs is safer.
What's the variability? So if you switch to the, how do you
The
get?
propane?
Yeah.
Well, propane's everywhere. So the nice thing about it, and there are a lot of people who will deliver it and make it available. And natural gas is pretty much everywhere too, except where you have to have a compressor in order to fill. But a lot of schools have already got fueling infrastructure for natural gas. And there may be some incentive money available for that too.
I think that's what we were setting up for in our district.
Probably, yeah.
Propane's more expensive.
Is it dollar per gallon equivalent?
Yeah.
Yeah, they did do something on the price in the presentations, and it was bouncing around all over the place.
Yeah, propane tends to go up and down with gasoline prices for that reason.
It's more locked in, yeah. And they were talking about renewable propane options and ideas too. Anyway, okay. Can we hear from Phil or Ann, make sure that, again, we do a notice to the tribes that we work with and within our district that this DERA money's available?
Yeah, I made a note of it.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate it. I don't know if they ever apply for it, but there's certainly no
They
reason.
applied for money from us.
Yeah, well, we can point them to this. But yeah, might as well help them if we can find incentive money for vehicles in the tribal nations. Okay, any other questions?
Dr. Lou,
Yes.
that's just a point to make on that. You know, we have an active program with tribes too, so it could be that EPA is already in contact with them. So I feel maybe, I don't know who the appropriate staff is, but we can put them in touch with the people here and they can, you know, coordinate and see what's needed.
Yeah, I just know we have an active proposal in right now that
Came from the tribes?
came from the tribes,
Okay.
yeah.
So at minimum, the ones who have made proposals to us should know that there may be some other options too. Okay, any other questions for John and EPA? Members of the public? Anyone else on the phone? Okay, thanks a lot for the update, John. And
Thank you.
go shake hands with anybody who was involved in moving forward with that low NOx standard.
We were the ringleaders, apparently. That's what the article said.
We'll try not to boast too much about that. Okay, Johnny, are you there from the Air Resources Board? Did you join us?
This is Brian Clerico for Johnny Raymond. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I hear you fine. Do you have an update for us,
Okay, great.
Brian?
Yeah, quick one. I wanted to jump real fast. I believe it was, and you mentioned the question from last meeting about the effect of the wildfires and SIP planning and modeling and all that. And I do have, I hope I have, still they have a meeting to rush off to, but Dr. Jeremy Aviv and Dr. Leonardo Ramirez here from the Air Resources Board that would be able to really provide the best answer to that, I think. Jeremy or Leonardo, are you on? They may have had to go to another meeting here. But anyway, I guess I'll have to ad lib. But I did speak with them about, what would be the effects of the wildfires on, maybe, particularly the modeling that would be done. And what they told me, and I'll do my best to faithfully represent what they said, but that they use the emissions from these wildfires are factored in to the modeling, the initial modeling run, I guess, and to verify the modeling is making accurate predictions about, the concentrations of various pollutants. But it's not they're still considered these exceptional events that are not, sort of factored into emission projections into the future. So that's basically but they do, they are, obviously they're taken, very seriously, and the emissions are, incorporated into the model.
So but for
Perfect, yeah.
exemption or issue, actually thinking about that, the PM non-attainment events would normally happen in the winter, right? When the PM levels are higher, but now that our fire season seems to go right through winter, it actually might become more of an issue.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point, because if it coincides with typically high days anyway, I think that might be a problem for disqualifying it, maybe.
Yeah.
Meeting the criteria to be an exceptional event.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry, they must have had to go off to another meeting here. So, but yes, and if you have other questions related to that, now that I think I have a handle on the right people here to get that, I can get back to Ann certainly with any answers.
Do you want to follow up on that, Bill? Are you interested?
Yeah, I guess where you lost me, and is that we have an attainment goal.
Yes.
All right. Now, foreseen events, business as usual, or exceptional events that would adversely impact that may not administratively count against us, but it still would affect the readings that you all are getting and make it.
Well, there's a process by which
Make it
you
more difficult.
claim that it's an exceptional event, and then it goes through the process, and EPA either says yes or no, right?
So they just EPA in
You can
effect
exclude
discounts
that, you can exclude that data point.
I see.
It's mostly done for the 24-hour standard, but it's becoming more apparent that it might impact the annual standard when you have weeks and weeks of wildfires.
So in other words, the goalposts aren't being moved then?
No, it's been like that since, what is it, 1977 in the Clean Air Act,
Yeah.
from being able to exclude these events that are beyond the control of any type of regulatory authority. It used to be called natural events, and now it's called exceptional events.
All right.
So there's a process in
But
place.
we also consider the 4th of July an exceptional event, don't we?
Well,
Because it's beyond the control of any authority.
so there is an exclusion for ceremonial events. So that's why I went from natural to exceptional.
Okay.
Okay, so the goal is to go.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think what Brian had said is when you're in your base year, when you're doing your model, you want your model to predict accurately what your actual readings are. So in the base year, in the past, you have to include that smoke in order to make that comparison, else there's no way to validly compare your monitor comparisons. But in the future, since you can exclude them, you don't have guidance is you don't have to put those emissions into the future. But people do, and we're always looking at how we can improve that. And at some point, if it happens every year at a certain time, and people have even made the case that is it really natural when some of the size of the wildfires, you could claim that it's really
Climate related.
well, at least a man-made kind of phenomenon because of, not allowing smaller fires to burn.
Oh.
And then the urban forest interface, all those things, is it really completely out of our control? People have been discussing that for some time.
Well, Brian, we went down a tangent there. You have more from the Air Resources Board for us?
Yeah, a couple of things. I just would mention here at the end of November, November 30th, there are some updates, some amendments to the statewide portable equipment registration program, the PERP program, are going to take effect, along with amendments to the portable diesel engine air toxic control measure, or ATCM, as you might know it. I don't know if, I'm going to try in here if, is James Aguilar, are you on the line?
Yep, okay.
Oh, great. Hey, James is here. So James is very knowledgeable about our PERP program. So I don't know, James, could you maybe in a sentence or two maybe summarize maybe the biggest or most important changes to the PERP registration program and the ATCM?
Sure. So the PERP registration program is staying more or less the same. The bulk of the changes came to the ATCM, the portable engine ATCM. And what we did was we found that the 2017 and 2020 fleet standards of the existing ATCM were going to be incredibly expensive and in a lot of cases impossible for fleets to come into compliance with. So we had to delay the reductions by a couple of years, but we also changed the way that we achieve these reductions. We went from a fleet average set of standards that had a relatively high compliance rate in early years, but a relatively low reporting rate. So we went from that type of schema over to a tier phase-out schema where we expire registrations from the PERT program or from the local districts based on a tier phase-out schedule that's in the new ATCM that will go effective at the end of the year. That's a pretty quick summary of what the changes were.
And that was that just to make enforcement easier, or was that because of the difficulty of getting people to report?
You know, it was kind of both of that. So one, we found that the smaller fleets didn't even know of the reporting requirement, even though it was in their operating conditions. So we found that by having a tier phase-out date that we can put front and center on the registration certificate, it would make it easier for the regulated community to know how long they have to operate these engines, and they can start planning on when they need to get funding to replace them. But yeah, there's also definite benefits when it comes to enforcement. It should help the local area districts enforce the regulation, and it'll help us kind of monitor what's going on in the database.
Great. Thanks.
Thanks, Jane. I don't know if anyone has any questions about the PERP program.
None here. Anyone on the phone? Any questions? No?
Thank you, James.
Yeah, no problem.
And then I thought I'd mention a couple more items here quickly. One, there's on our website, there's a summary of public comments and responses to those comments received by CARB regarding the Aliso Canyon mitigation agreement. So that's it's a fairly long 35-page document, I think. But if you're interested in issues related to Aliso Canyon methane leak, that would be worth consulting. A couple workshops and meetings in your area. One tomorrow, there's a webinar that you can sign up for online on proposed amendments to the area designations for state ambient air quality standards. That's tomorrow at 10 a.m., scheduled for about an hour. There's a Sustainable Communities Workshop scheduled for, let's see, that's, looks like December 12th at 2 o'clock. And the satellite location for this webinar for the Sustainable Communities Public Workshop is in, looks like the Southern California Association of Governments, Policy Room A on Wilshire Boulevard. There's also on Tuesday, December 4th at 10 a.m., there's a CARB and California Transportation Commission public meeting that will be at the LA County Metropolitan Transportation Authority. And that's, let's see, yeah, December 4th, 10 a.m. And then last, thought I'd mention this somewhat overlaps, but there's a couple meetings here for it. There's a public workshop on the update to the 3-year plan for light duty vehicle and transportation equity investment. And that will be also on December 4th. That's an all-day meeting. You can it'll be held at the CARB in El Monte, office in El Monte. There will also be on the Wednesday on December 5th in the morning, 9 to noon. Also follow-up meeting for that. It's a 2-day workshop. So anyway, that's just kind of a quick overview of workshops and meetings that might be of interest to people in the South Coast area. And are there any questions or
Yeah, you have
items I can?
Bill Maher?
Yeah, Brian, I have a question. I show that CARB has a meeting, public workshop on December 13, which is the first day of your board meeting, on your proposed regulation for reporting criteria of air pollutants and tax.
Right. Well, I don't, let's see. Sorry, where is that again?
It's on December 13th at 9 a.m.
That's for the emissions inventory regulation? It's going to be brought up that same day?
Well, I was looking at their calendar.
Right, but the board meeting in December is when they're supposed to be considering that regulation, isn't it?
And it runs.
Phil might know more later today.
Yeah, I'll have to, yeah, I'd be happy to follow up with you on that.
If you would, that's an important rule to some of us here.
Yeah,
Those
absolutely.
regulations.
Yeah, I'll try to find out more about today and get back to Ann.
But that is the same day that the board probably,
It's the first day of a 2-day board meeting.
and they're supposed to take up the regulation at that meeting, either that day or the next.
Yeah, we've submitted written comments on that proposed regulation.
So are you looking at a workshop or the actual hearing?
Well, it says a public workshop, so.
Yeah.
I'll find out.
And that's why I was questioning it, because it did seem, unusual.
Yeah. So there's
Right.
been some discussion about the emission inventory reporting requirements that are supposed to be normalized of some way between everybody and sent to the Air Resources Board, right?
It's tied into AB 617.
Yeah. And there's a draft proposal from the ARB staff, and you're having a conversation today.
So this is,
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt, this is the calendar, and what it says on the calendar is public hearing to consider proposed amendments to the regulation for the mandatory reporting of greenhouse gas emissions.
There should be another item that does air toxics and criteria pollutants.
No, originally it was December, I don't know.
I'm not
That
seeing
was my
that.
understanding.
Not seeing
Not
that.
on there.
I'll follow up on
This is
that. I mean,
November,
yeah.
this is December.
Ah, there you go.
December.
You're a month behind. Or a month ahead, one way. All right, so that's an outstanding kind of question. If we can figure that out, it'd be probably helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Anything else, Brian?
No, nothing else.
Any other questions, comments for Brian? Any members of the public? Okay. All right, thanks for that update. That brings us to agenda item number 5, the legislative update from Philip, who I know is here somewhere. Right? Oh, there he is.
Yeah.
I saw him come in. I didn't see where he sat.
No problem. My presentation will be relatively brief this month. Legislative Committee held a meeting on Friday, November 9th, and AQMD's state legislative consultants did provide written reports on state legislative activities in Sacramento, and that should be included in the packets that are available on the back table. But the rest of the meeting was primarily focused on interviewing consultant firms and recommending execution of contracts for our AQMD's legislative representation in Washington, D.C. The Leg Committee members interviewed representatives from the following 4 firms: the Carmen Group, Cassidy and Associates, Kadish and Associates, and the Glover Park Group. After the interviews were concluded, the committee members recommended that the governing board authorize the execution of contracts with the Carmen Group, Cassidy Associates, and Kadish and Associates for representation in D.C. And just to clarify, those are the 3 firms that are AQMD's current federal legislative representative in D.C. And that's my report. We'll see what happens at the board meeting.
So the other.
There was
the
a
other
4th one.
The 4th one was.
Was not recommended.
Okay. Any questions or comments? I presume that we're working on AQMD sponsored or supported legislation for California for next year?
Yes, we are.
Finding authors? Building coalitions?
We are working on both, absolutely. We're starting early this year.
We're going to sail through?
Oh, I sure hope so. It'll be work, definitely some challenges.
I've been saying it's going to be a make or break year for whether or not we actually have a chance of raising the money to fulfill our obligations in the AQMD. Which, if EPA gets around to it, will become federal law at some point. We're all counting on you. No pressure.
Me and the team. I definitely work with a lot of,
Although I heard Phil say that the $1 billion a year actually may be ballooning to $3 billion a year. So either that's true or he's aiming for a job at the high-speed rail project. Okay. Any other questions, comments, legislative updates? Members of the public, people on the phone, anybody? All right. Thank you very much, Phil. That's got to be the shortest report you've ever had.
Except for when we don't have a meeting. So
those are shorter.
Yeah.
I guess you could say that. Bill, we got litigation and other related EPA type issues.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Liu. Yes. Actually, there's really nothing in addition to the status report that I actually prepared for the home rule members. So I'm here, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer that.
I can't remember any litigation issues. Anyone have litigation questions, comments? That was a very short one.
Yes. I'm trying to beat Phil Kraft.
You did.
You did. You normally do. All right, so that's just the litigation update. It's in the package, all the information you need to know and have. And so since Dr. Gosh is caught up in a meeting, we're going to have Dr. Fine give us the update on AB 617 implementation. Item 7.
Thanks. So Joe Kay is speaking on the same topic next door at the AWMA conference, and it's only fair because I was supposed to be over there, but I'm here instead. So if we
Which
just-
conference is it?
It's a,
Air Waste Management. Oh, really? It's here today?
Yeah.
I want to do this on behalf of Dr. Gosh. Both of us have been obviously very involved in this. There's been a lot of activity on this topic, and I know it's kind of a standing agenda item under Kurt's item 8C, but we thought we'd give you an update because, again, there's been a lot going on. So just to remind everyone, AB 617 passed last year as a companion bill to the extension of the cap and trade program. The goal being to really focus on air quality and air quality at the local level, not necessarily the regional level, which has been the focus before. And there's a lot of different aspects to AB 617. I've listed kind of the main ones here, and some of these other companion bills as well. But it's community-centered. It's looking at those disadvantaged communities most impacted by air pollution and nearby sources. There's the two largest aspects of it, or at least originally we thought were the two largest aspects of it, is community air monitoring, as well as the development of community-specific emission reduction plans. Other aspects of 617 were easier access to emissions data, which was just discussed, and CARB is looking at a statewide rule for that. Requirements for best emission controls or best available retrofit control technology, which is one of the topics that's being discussed next door. As well as clean technology investments. So as a companion to AB 617, there has been two very substantial budget bills that have taken a lot of the cap and trade revenue and put it towards specific air quality programs that are not quite $1 billion a year for us, but have really doubled or tripled the amount of money we have for incentive programs to get the cleanest available equipment out there. So this is all tied together. Those clean technology investments are directed towards these disadvantaged communities. The monitoring can lead into the emission reduction plans. The monitoring can track progress in emission reduction plans, and we should be getting additional emission reductions through the BART requirements as well. The deadlines within AB 617 are very, very tight. Almost unrealistic, I would say. But so far, we haven't missed one. So the first deadline occurred in October of this year, where CARB had to set the statewide strategy, but also select the year one communities. So that happened in October, and we, as a district, recommended 4 communities to CARB, and they chose 3 of them, and there's been a lot of discussion around that. That's almost old news in AB 617 right now, since there's been a lot of activity since then. By July of next year, these year one communities need to deploy air monitoring, and we're working hard at doing that. And then by September 27th, or 1 year from when CARB adopted the first year communities, we have to submit our emission reduction plans for those year one communities to CARB. So we have to bring that to our board by next September in order to get that to CARB in that 1 year deadline. And then a further out deadline is 2023, where there's a deadline for districts to implement, or non-attainment districts to implement best available retrofit control technology at their largest sources. And obviously we have our work cut out for us to do this within the same sunset that our board has directed. And so our challenges there are a little different than some of the other districts. So we have really focused on the community aspects of the program. So those are those top 2 here, although we're actively working with CARB and with other stakeholders on the other aspects. So in terms of what I'm going to focus on is those top 2. So between February and June, we did go through this long process, technical process, and public process for identifying and prioritizing communities. As I said, we made that recommendation to the CARB board. We submitted that in July. CARB approved them in September. And since that time, we have been frantically holding our first kickoff meetings and community steering committee meetings in our year one communities. As I mentioned before, this is the community identification prioritization process we've already been through. So again, Air Resources Board selected 10 communities statewide. Again, we have 3 of them, but just because a community was not selected as a year one community does not mean we're not already working towards potential year 2 communities because we have to do that outreach, the technical work, and get a head start because of the tight deadlines in the program. So we've had community meetings. We have 3 communities. If you don't know, one is the Wilmington, West Long Beach, Carson area. A second one is kind of Boyle Heights, East LA, Northwestern Commerce area. And the third one is in San Bernardino City, but also including the community of Muscoy. So we had a series of kickoff meetings in each community, and we've convened community steering committees for 2 of those communities and held the first community steering committee meeting for 2 of the communities. The last one is the week after Thanksgiving in Commerce. Dr. Liu has attended all the steering committee meetings thus far. So key input received to date from not only the steering committee meetings, but also leading up to the community selection, or which sources should we focus on? And it's your usual suspects, whether it's diesel sources, kind of oil production and processing, and then landfills and kind of the waste stream sites that we deal with every day. A lot of comments on looking at schools near pollution sources or pollution sources near schools, and these industrial areas that include schools, looking at areas where there's a concentration of industries, also looking at green spaces, which you might think is a little bit outside of our purview, but it's something we can work with other agencies on addressing. And then we asked for types of factors we should be looking at to prioritize these communities, and there's a whole list here, many of which are included in CalEnviroScreen already. But one of the things that we were able to add to our priority list was some software we wrote that can look at the proximity of schools to industrial areas, and we use that as a criteria for ranking these communities. We also have this as another criteria, our MATE studies, multiple air toxic exposure studies. This is MATES 4, so the latest data we have final is from 2012, 2013 timeframe, but we're in the middle of MATES 5. It won't be complete for the year 1 communities, but as data becomes available, we'll try to integrate that as best we can into year 1 and then moving forward into subsequent years of communities. Again, this is CalEnviroScreen, so you can see the different factors that go into this statewide ranking. It goes census tract by census tract and ranks each census tract by these different factors, a combination of these factors. So it includes exposures, it includes environmental effects, it includes population characteristics for sensitive populations, as well as other social and economic factors. This was a tool we developed for schools near industrial areas and freeways. It was an interesting tool because if you look at CalEnviroScreen and MATES, they sort of show the same areas. They kind of overlap greatly because they do include some of the same factors. But when we looked at this, it was definitely a different pattern. So some of the communities raised up in the ranking based on this measure.
Which one specifically?
I believe that Southgate.
San Fernando Valley?
I believe that Southgate.
North Orange County?
Again, it was just one of many factors, but I think one of the reasons we recommended that 4th community wasn't chosen in the first year, the Southgate Florence Firestone area was number 1 for this factor. And if Joe K was here and Pedro is here, is that true, what I just said?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I'm seeing right now the area that I represent.
Yeah, popped out, right? Just above Santa Ana?
No, well, there's 2 areas that I know that we basically control the city, the districts, and then see this area right in here?
That's where you're on the board, right?
Yeah, and that's my area right there.
Yeah, so this was something that we developed in-house, and now there's a lot of other people.
So what do you do once you find it?
Well, we put it into we use this factor, we use the MATES factor, we use CalEnviroScreen factors, and we looked at all 3 factors and went through a stepwise approach to kind of whittle down our highest ranked communities.
Would it be helpful for you to have a big copy of this map?
Yeah, because one of the things is that we get issues, people, because I got power lines, I got all the issues.
So this is proximity to freeways, and you kind of know that you have schools next to freeways, but in the context of who else does, this gives you a good picture of it.
So we have this online in a
But
searchable
what do you
format.
do, once you find out, okay, I got all these factors, well, how do you mitigate? What do you mitigate once you find it?
Well, again,
Well, you don't move schools, it's a little difficult.
No, but how do
You don't move freeways either.
so that's a question as we engage with the communities that were selected. So there's 3 communities selected now.
You come to me and you say, okay, you're in an area with a high cancer risk, high pesticides, high this, high that, all these risk factors for health. I got 6,000 kids, or Santa Ana's got 59,000. What do you tell the parents? Okay, so what do you do? How do we mitigate those? It's not within my realm to do land use control.
Right, so within the selected communities, we will look at that, we'll see what we can do as an agency under our purview to reduce emissions that are impacting that from those industrial facilities. Whatever we can do on freeways and roads, we have some limited authority, but we do run a lot of incentive programs. We advocate for tighter emission standards. And then we see what else we can do. If there's land use issues, we hope to work with the local planning agencies to see if there's anything they can do. If there's other agencies that deal with pesticides or other toxic substances in the soil or water that we hope to bring into the process. But we can't do every one of these 50-some communities.
No, but let me pose this question. Okay, and I pose it all the time when I go to conferences to people and all the learned doctors that I gotta deal with. You guys find that I have these issues within my, whether it be a learning issue, a disability, or a facilities issue. What, if you learn in, say, in El Monte, or in the Southeast, or down in San Bernardino, that these characteristics and these issues have handled it, and you found from those communities those issues, how do you mitigate now, and you put into, because what you're looking for at the end is some type of action or practice that'll lower that risk factor, right? So it's, I'd rather, it's fine, you find something up in Highland or down in this area, instead of waiting for me to come to day 3 or 4, like I'm the one waiting for the injection for the virus, but by the time you get to me, my bed, I'm dead, with the cure.
That's why we're giving you the update, so you can follow this process, and we're really early on.
So
and these communities will come up with
the plans.
The plans that have to be approved by September 27th.
So if you can have a plan that'll affect the rest of the other communities that aren't part of it.
But then you can look at the plan and say, what applies to my community? Do any of these work? And you can also propose to be a community in the future.
Well, we do what we can under our authority within the plans.
There's no silver bullet, right? There's
no, that's what I'm saying, because so you gotta either litigate, legislate, or go for a political resolution.
It's going to be a whole lot of different types of solutions. Some of them will be better land use decisions, so don't put any new schools near freeways.
Right, there's no property left, so then it's practices.
Yeah, well, a lot of schools went in next to freeways.
Or the freeways the freeways went down basically because they went to areas of color, because that was areas that were cheap and they used eminent domain, because those communities didn't have the political or the legal ability to fight those type of amendments.
And there's a lot of chickens and a lot of eggs in that conversation.
But back end, we're living with what we gotta live with.
Yeah, we are, and some of the
what
solutions are very long term.
Can you provide to the cities that do regulate the local things?
That's part of the process, and a lot of the things we do in the selected communities will be applicable elsewhere. If we pass a rule, let's say on some medical facilities, because of something we find in one community, it's probably going to be a basin-wide rule that's going to reduce emissions across the board. When we, as part of these plans, we will be directing incentive funding towards getting the dirtiest trucks off the road. That will benefit everywhere those trucks go, not in that.
Because one of the things that I saw in Santa Ana, everybody's in for the environmental reuse and recycling, but guess where they put all the recycling centers? And there's, Art, you don't have to worry. We're only going to have 400 trucks come in and deliver stuff. Okay, you got 400 coming in. There's also 400 going out. So you don't have 400, you have 800. And it's right next to a school.
So that's one of the other things we're looking at is, again, we don't have authority to tell a city how to zone their streets or make
No,
know
what we
where the
did
truth
is we went political.
Well, that
When
could
you,
be
all
one
the other
outcome.
ones fail, you go political.
That could be another outcome of this program.
And
But we're
the other
just
thing
getting
that I'm
started.
looking at now, frankly, is that we now have some of those people from some of those communities now in the legislative ability at Congress to make some of those decisions. So when we meet with them, I need to know from the learned folk is what practices are best, because we gotta live with society. You know, I come from a mining area. We needed to work, we needed these things. And, you know, it's just like Joe's area. We gotta live with some of these things we're not gonna be able to mitigate. Some we can. So from you folk, we need to know what can we do.
So that's why it's important to pay attention to the 617 process. It's one of the first times we're going to be really trying to get at these cumulative impact issues in a more systematic way. And we'll have to see what we come up with. I mean, it's just not preordained yet. We have to look at it.
Yeah, and I suggest, you know, we got a CSBA meeting with about 5,000 folk up in San Francisco coming up. And one of the things is, it comes up all the time, you know, we have a huge, and I think here, well, I got probably 10, 15 people here. I would imagine here.
If you want to put together a panel on air quality and health, I'm sure that Phil and Joe K would be happy.
Because, you know, we have
happy to go up
autism, we
there
have
and
all
talk to
kinds of
the
issues
schools.
that affect that.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to put together a panel or some way for the district to participate in that, I think it'd be helpful. I mean, there's also, you know,
I'm not part of that.
and others who.
I got enough stuff to deal with, the litigation stuff. But, you know, I look for the litigation and the other, I frankly just gave up on a lot of the discussion stuff. I now just either litigate or adjudicate.
All right, well.
So, or legislate.
But if you know of opportunities for us to talk to these people who might be able to help.
Because it's an education process of people in governance.
Tyrone, did you want to say something now, or do you want to wait till we're done with this?
We can wait till we're done.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm just going to move through this quickly. So after we took in all those factors, there were 55 communities that we identified as the higher priority communities. This covers almost half of our population, but when you take in all those factors, that's what we come up with. Now, we can't do 55 communities simultaneously in this program. Each community is an incredible effort, as I'll mention in a moment. So again, we have 3 going forward. We mentioned that kind of how we decided. We had all those 55 communities. We peeled off the area in eastern Coachella Valley because there's different data sets, different factors there. We know it's a deserving community. It wasn't selected in the first year, but they wouldn't have ranked highly if we didn't kind of consider them separately. So we did peel them off as a separate community with separate issues, and we'll probably be recommending them in the coming years. But then you look within the South Coast, and then we applied this screening criteria, and then we kind of divided for like the 1 through 5 or 6 year communities and the 6+ year communities. Within the highest priority communities from 1 through 5, we looked at additional factors.
So about how many did we have in the higher priority communities?
I think it cut it in about half,
Okay.
20 something, 30, between 20 and 30, I believe. And then amongst those, we looked at different factors. We did another screen looking at all the factors, making sure they were really in the top ranks under those different factors. Cut that down to, I think, about 14 under item 4 to the left. Then the last one, it was really, a lot of it was about, it was how highly they ranked, but also how quickly we can deploy and how the contacts we had in those communities to hit some of those deadlines in year 1. We had done work in East LA and Boyle Heights. We had willing partners there. We had willing partners in San Bernardino. We had partners in Wilmington. No one's arguing that Wilmington is not one of our highest priority communities out there, or Boyle Heights, and San Bernardino has some obviously unique issues. And so those were fairly obvious communities to go for year 1. We had done a lot of work there before, and it allowed us to hit the ground running, which so far so good. We are running. These are the 3 communities I mentioned before. Just some details about each community. If you have, you can get this presentation to go into some details. But we had our first kickoff meeting on October 2nd. Then we had our first steering committee meeting on October 30th. Our steering committees are running about 30 to 35 people strong. There's a definitely desire to have them be locally based, local addresses, active residents, although there is representation from local businesses. also government agencies, community organizations. But obviously, MATES 4, this was the highest ranked community in MATES 4, and very high in Cal EnviroScreen. In East Los Angeles, this was one of the highest ranked in Cal EnviroScreen across the state. So if you look at it, these first three communities are really highly ranked in at least one of the three. Highly ranked in all of them, but like really towards the top in one of them. And then in Boyle Heights, again, San Bernardino, Cal EnviroScreen 99.7th percentile, so very high. So San Bernardino, we've already had our kickoff meeting and community steering meeting. Commerce, we had our kickoff meeting and our community steering committee meetings on November 28th. And what's the purpose of the steering committee? It's really to identify and prioritize air pollution issues, to guide us in doing the community air monitoring deployment and the emissions reduction program. Initially, we're looking to help define that community or look at those community boundaries of that analysis area of what we're going to look at. We definitely need help in bringing people into the process for community outreach and communicating two ways with the community members that may not be able to make the meetings or may not even be aware of the program, and obviously to track progress. And I mentioned we have a wide variety of stakeholders on these steering committees. So at the kickoff meetings, we didn't have a steering committee yet. So we gave out interest forms. People gave us the interest forms. We contacted, at least for the two so far, I think we're still working on Commerce, contacted them, verified some information, and are having those first meetings, as I mentioned. You know, a lot of this information is on our website. We're keeping it very up to date. For instance, we still have a story map of that criteria, that school criteria, where you can actually zoom in specific areas. It's overlaid and in an interactive map. So it's a very good resource if you're interested in the program. Just hmd.gov/AB617. So our next steps are convening those steering committee meetings, and then we need to, again, get the air monitoring deployed by July, emission reduction plans done by probably July as well to get through a process with our board. That is probably 5 or 6 times faster than plans usually get developed at AQMD. So we don't want to take shortcuts, but we're going to be moving really quickly. And we're telling the steering committee that to expect this to move really quickly. It doesn't mean we don't want all their input. We want them to be integral in the development of the plans, but we have to move very quickly in order to hit these deadlines. Again, AB617, our app, so there's lots of ways to stay connected if you're interested. One thing we didn't put here is there's a lot of technical work that has to go into this plan development in terms of inventory, modeling, some very complex issues. We are looking to put together not a centralized kind of a technical advisory group that we have meetings maybe quarterly here at the district that'll be made up of a few members from each steering committee, the more technically inclined, and we'll dive into some of the inventory and modeling that, we're not going to have time to dive into that level of detail at the steering committee meetings in the community, but that'll give us some good feedback on whether we're on the right track, kind of on the technical side of things.
Okay, shameless promotion for the AQMD, the new app. It is pretty slick. It gives you AQI right where you are automatically, and I highly recommend you download it and take a look at it because it's pretty impressive. Anyway,
Is that new from the previous one? Or?
Yeah, it's updated.
Oh.
It's been out about a month.
So if you haven't updated it in the last month, then go do it. Did you still have a question or comment?
Yes, I did. Your slide,
And then we'll go to Dan and then
I'm not sure if you have this or not. The schools that are near industrial areas or freeways, do you guys have a specific list of schools by name, specifically in the South LA
Can you see the
area?
data itself?
I know you can zoom in on the map. I don't know if the schools.
You can zoom in on the map from here?
No, if you go to our website.
Oh, I was trying to do that. Maybe it's just mine.
Not from the slides. There's an interactive map.
Yeah.
It might be a different part. We could send that out. And obviously, to do this analysis, we had a database of schools. So we could look
That's somewhere, yes.
Yeah.
I'll look that up.
Okay.
The other question I had, our last neighborhood council meeting, one of our big issues we're having with LAX. Previously, I wrote a letter to Deborah Flint of LAWA in regards to the airport noise because they're doing the construction, and some of the lanes have changed to over houses that are not retrofitted with air conditioners and noise deadening windows or whatever. So the next issue is that we're having, people are starting to talk about the air quality now. Since I'm bringing this information to our neighborhood council meetings, it's a big concern with air. So even though South LA area is not involved with the part of the AB 617 now, if we decide to purchase commercially available air monitors, do you guys do trainings on how to provide you guys or CARB with the information?
Yeah, so we have a program, it's called SCAQMD, Air Quality Sensor Performance Evaluation Center. And so one thing it does is look at all the commercially available lower cost sensors, test them, and tries to figure out which ones are performing well, because they don't all perform well. I wouldn't recommend just going and buying a random one off the internet. I would go to our SCAQMD website and see the ones that perform well. Dr. Liu's familiar with one of probably a handful that are pretty decent. And what SCAQMD also does, and we've received external funding from EPA and others to do this, is actually do deployments and do some training with communities. There's Dr. Gosh, but I already got through your presentation. But now she can answer all the questions better than I can. So yeah, if you're interested, I would contact the SCAQMD folks. We can get you in touch with them and see if they have any programs coming up. They are developing materials of like training of how to train communities that want to do this. So we've been working with that. It's also going to be an aspect of the whatever communities are selected for AB 617.
Right.
Anticipate there will be some sensor deployments in many of those communities. But yeah, there's a lot of work being done on that.
So there are things that these sensors can measure and things that they can't. One sensor that has proven to be pretty accurate when compared to the federal reference and federal equivalent measurements is the PM sensor that Purple Air has developed. Coalition for Clean Air puts these out in communities. We have our own network, and so I'd be happy to talk to you about it too. There might be, we actually have some specific funding for the Alameda Corridor, so if any of these community members that are in the Alameda Corridor, we're certainly really interested in getting them out there. But other places in South Central would be great too. So
I'll just
talk to SCAQMD. And
yeah, I talked to the guys in the lab about a month ago. I got a little tour and they filled me in on all the stuff they were doing. That's worth doing. I mean, there's information on the website, but I'm sure they'd be happy to take you and anybody else and take you into the lab and show you what they're doing. It's really pretty interesting.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But again, we can't measure everything with those sensors.
Right.
PM 2.5 we can measure. I mean, we've done measurements around LAX.
Right.
And others have too. We do find ultrafine particles, but these Purple Air sensors really isn't a sensor that can measure ultrafine as well.
Yeah, and for aircraft emissions, you would be interested in ultrafine, which there's no low-cost sensor that can do that. And can you see if you can work with SCAQMD staff and see if maybe at the end of our next meeting, those who are interested could tour the lab?
Sure.
That would be nice.
Yes, it takes 20 minutes, 30 minutes.
I'll bring the vegan cookies.
It'll be, yeah, we'll do a non, majority of the members. We don't have a public meeting issue. Dan, you had a...
I just had a question on, I don't know what slide it is, the one that had the key input received. And if I understand correctly, so you haven't had actual steering committee meetings? You have?
Had 2 of the 3.
Okay.
Met.
Okay.
Just
So
the first one.
is the
This
date,
is more input from our process previous to that,
right?
So they're going to be meeting monthly, right?
monthly meeting.
So this data this is comments received from people who are
Yes.
at these initial workshops, the ones you had before
Yes.
formal steering
We
committee?
did about 10 or 12 meetings when we were going through the prioritization process.
Okay, because I know everybody knows somewhat the sources might be around them or something, or maybe the sources they're concerned with, but I'm assuming that once these things get going and more robustly, that the monitoring is what is supposed to kind of drive the key pollutants or something.
Potentially, but we do have a lot of good emissions data too, so we need to.
Well, that's what I'm saying. You guys have data, MACE data,
Yeah.
whatever, and then whatever you get in the local monitoring that takes place, that data as a whole, I was under the impression would be the basis for selecting
Absolutely.
sources or something like that.
We might need to develop new tools in terms of modeling tools as well to help us with that.
Okay, thanks.
Art, and then Dan?
Well, this is a request and also a kind of a challenge to Mr. Fine and company. Because we got money available, and one of the things that I would like to see, if I'm not getting new AC units or anything else, but it's a health issue, regulatory issue. The schools we're running a lot of bonds, and we run about every 15, 20 years. I know Santa Ana right now has got about $1 billion plus in bonds for modernization in new schools. What is and they always ask, because I used to run these programs before, the school for the insurance companies. What is the actual cost of these monitoring systems? Are they low voltage? Is it hard to put in? Because if it's something that's maybe $500 or $1,000 or something that we could put in, then we could all apply under a collaborative for. Because I know there's within 3 or 4 districts within the area that I have. I just make a few phone calls and we'll get it all on the agenda and we'll get it approved. So I'd bring in half the county of Orange, which is everything from Santa Ana up. And not only those, but also the colleges and stuff. So it would provide you with a good model if we could get that. And then we could get it down to within, probably within a mile of each other. The monitors, because it may be effective, you know.
Low cost is anywhere from a couple $100 up to 5,000 or more, depending on what you want to monitor for.
That's a question. What is it that we want to monitor for?
That's the first question.
Yeah, that's the first question you need to ask.
Yeah.
You know, if it's something that's an odor issue,
Yeah.
it doesn't provide it. But if it's something that impairs, because you got to remember that the people that get sick is the young and the old. Mm-hmm. So I got all these little kids from 3 years old from childcare all the way to 6th grade. Then we got all the other ones that are 18. And these schools are all our schools, between the elementary, the middle schools, and the high schools, we're all within half a mile of each other. So what is it that we want to monitor? And then say, now I monitor and I find this. What do we mitigate? How do we mitigate it? Is there a solution? Okay, you know, I can take all these tests and I have something, but there's no solution for it.
Right. So again, you're right. The first question is, what do you want to monitor for? If you're worried about PM 2.5,
and what can I mitigate?
Well,
if I monitor and I find it, I can't do anything.
Well, one mitigation that we have funded a lot of, and probably will fund more of as part of this program, is high efficiency filtration in the schools. We've talked about that before, where at least when the kids are inside, which we know is not all day, that we can filter out some of the ultrafine particles, diffusive particles, better than like the traditional, AC systems, HVAC systems that are out there. There's even solutions for in the classroom where you don't even have an HVAC system in an older classroom. There's standalone filtration units. So we've done a lot of work there. That's one mitigation. It's not perfect. The real ultimate mitigation is reduce emissions.
You gotta remove the cost. That's the biggest thing.
So the purple air sensors, you can buy them off their website for about $250 each.
Okay.
You
can provide that
you
stuff
need to
for
have
me, so
an
that way I can just email
standard
it to
electrical outlet and access to a Wi-Fi signal. Then you just register them and they work. It's pretty simple. Nan?
Going back to the key milestones slide, I had a question about the December 2023 deadline for implementing best available retrofit control technologies. How does that relate to the emissions reductions plan for the
That's a good question. We view that requirement, and if you look at the statute, as not necessarily a community-based part of the statute. Will there be benefits in these communities from rules we passed to implement BARC? Yes, but those are being implemented on a basin-wide basis. So it's not necessarily tied to which communities we select. That is a requirement that is independent of which communities we select. So we're obviously working very hard on a series of a dozen or so rules to, just for NOx right now, to make sure that those requirements are in place. But it's broader than just the selected communities. We'll report back, if there are benefits to those communities from those actions, from those regulatory actions, they will go into the emission reduction plans, because they will be achieving emission reductions. But it's a broader requirement.
And does that apply to all equipment in general, or is there specific types of equipment that will be?
For BARC, specifically the legislation, it only applies to facilities that are in the statewide GHG cap and trade program. But we.
As of January 1st.
As of January 1st of
this year.
This year?
Was it this year or last year?
I think it was 2017.
2017, yeah.
However, regardless, we have other requirements to implement BARC outside of that new part of the statute that set this 2023 deadline. So we're already obligated to have all facilities meet BARC. So we're passing these rules that are broader than just the cap and trade facilities.
Joe K., is there anything you wanted to add to this?
I apologize for being late. My previous presentation was late, but I presume you probably covered it really well. As far as anything to add, I'm just going to put in a plug for November 28th. We're going to be in Boyle Heights. First year.
And the membership of that committee will be announced
very soon.
Very soon.
We're actually still looking for active residents for membership for that community. So if you know anyone, if you live in that community, let us know.
I do want to commend Joe K. and her staff, one of which is here, Pedro, for getting this thing rolling. It is an incredible amount of work to get just three communities rolling with about three dedicated staff. And help from others as well, and LPA has been helping out a lot.
Yeah, we had a lot of staff out in San Bernardino.
But at the same time, CARB has 70 people working on this full time, and we're ramping up, we're staffing up to get this far. The staffing we have has been an incredible feat.
I'd like to say that I saw a marked improvement between Wilmington and San Bernardino. I saw that you changed some things, you tweaked some things, you changed the order of some things just to make it go smoother, and it really worked better. And so I was really happy to see the learning curve take effect, and assume that Commerce would be even better. But San Bernardino was a really good meeting. I thought it went really well.
We're going to make lots of mistakes in this program.
Yeah.
We're learning as we go.
Right. But I saw the adjustment. I mean, it really made a difference. Okay. Art, did you have
Yeah, just when I worked for the census, that's one of the areas that I covered.
Oh.
And what we did is that we in the census data, there's a list of community organizations. So go to the census data, and there you can download all the communications where they're located, the church groups, community groups, and such. And then I have friends that are architects in that area.
I don't think so. You might just ask. Okay. Yeah, we're trying to figure out who else we know in those communities.
Which community were you guys looking for?
It's the Boyle Heights and West Commerce.
Did you try the neighborhood councils? They're free.
I think we do have applicants from the neighborhood council. We need more applicants.
And obviously Resurrection Church and East Yard Communities for Environmental Justice. And there's a whole bunch.
Arthur Chuleta just got elected to the Senate. He's from Commerce.
Yeah, so we actually have a lot of participation from community organizations. In fact, we have we have a pretty substantial list from organizations. So we're looking for active residents.
Right.
Yeah.
Who actually live there, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I was going to volunteer, but.
Any other questions or comments for anybody on this issue of AB 615? Yes.
Dr. Lisa Robinson, yeah, I have a question. Last year, $250 million was appropriated for AB 1617 implementation throughout the state. So just wondering, any estimate how much of that money will be spent for these 3 select communities?
So the first year of funding, AB 134, 250 million statewide. We received little over 107 million of that in South Coast. The legislation was very specific that it had to be spent in Carl Moyer or Prop 1B type programs. That money, we were oversubscribed in our Moyer program, so we had a bunch of great projects that were ready to go. We did not have the communities selected at the time, so we made sure, and I think over 87, 89% or so of the money of that 107 million was spent in disadvantaged communities as a whole, not necessarily the 3 selected.
For last month, all of that 45 million was 100% EJ or disadvantaged community.
Right. So then there were 2 tranches. There was a 60 million and about kind of oversubscribed. We had it in-house already, and then there was another 40 or so million that we went out for another bid
a couple weeks ago.
And we got that, and now those have been approved, I believe. And those were 100%. That second tranche was an 100% disadvantage, but as a whole, not necessarily those communities. This year, 245 million was dedicated statewide instead of 250 million. We expect, to get our fair share, trying for more than our fair share, at least 100 million, hopefully more.
That's good news.
And it's less restrictive. It does not say Carl Moyer 1B. It's open to stationary source incentives. It has more of a focus on the AB 617 communities. I'm not sure all of it can be spent in 1 year in those communities, but there will be a focus on trying to direct as much funding as possible to those selected communities.
Either in the communities or
to benefit.
To the benefit of those communities, right?
So there will be an effort at least to try to direct money to the selected communities, but there's obviously needs throughout the basin. So CARB is now working on the guidelines for how that 245 million is going to be spent. So they're taking comment on that. They've been presenting at our steering committee meetings, trying to get feedback on those guidelines. We expect them to be a lot more flexible than the Moyer and 1B programs to allow us to spend as much as we can in those communities. So, but it hasn't been divided up yet across the different districts, and the guidelines have not been developed yet. Does that answer your question, Shane?
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Pham. That's very helpful.
Any other questions? Anyone behind the velvet rope? I feel so much more secure with that there. Okay, great. Thank you, Dr. Goss, Dr. Fine. And that brings us to subcommittee status reports. Kurt probably has nothing to talk about anymore, but you were freight sustainability down?
Sure, just real briefly. So I have one meeting that I just got an email, so I don't think Brian at CARB talked about this one, but there's on December 4th, they're going to have workshops on light and heavy duty fleet requirements and the advanced clean truck regulation. The first one is scheduled to be a short meeting, which is primarily for fleets. So to look at their requirements and stuff. And then the second one is going to be, and it's in the afternoon, it's going to focus on market potential for zero emission trucks. And so the first one's at 10:30 in the morning, and this is in Sacramento at CARB headquarters or Cali J building. And the second one's at 12:30 to 4:30 in the afternoon. So basically all day. So those are going on. I think just enough. December 4th.
Okay.
And then,
you got anything else?
Yeah, a couple of them, just real quick. So, and then the one CARB meeting that Brian mentioned was on December 4th and 5th, and that had to do with the 3-year plan for light-duty vehicles. But the first day is focused on clean vehicle rebate project, so which is where they provide funding or rebates and stuff like that. And the second day is focused on transportation equity projects. So Art, you might be interested in that one. It's basically aimed at increasing access to clean transportation and mobility options in disadvantaged and low-income communities and low-income households.
What is that?
That's at, yeah, but it's in El Monte. These meetings are in El Monte on December 4th and 5th, and the transportation equity is on the 5th from 9 to noon. And they'll talk about clean vehicle ownership, clean mobility, streamlining access to funding and financing opportunities.
Are they having any of those in any other communities?
This is the only one that I'm aware of, yeah. And then the California Freight Mobility Plan is underway, has been underway for a bit of this year. They are having a California Freight Advisory Committee meeting on the 29th, and they cover a wide variety of topics, including the Freight Mobility Plan, but SB1 projects. They talk the freight, review the freight, California Freight Symposium, and they're having a topic on the Port of LA on their information portal. And then the next meetings in January is actually going to be in San Diego at the Port Authority. So that's all I got.
Okay, great. Bill Lamar, small business considerations update?
Yeah, since our last meeting, we consulted with the Metal Finishing Association and the industry for that matter, right up through the adoption of Rule 1469, which I might add is a punishing rule for smaller facilities, but acceptable for the larger ones. So they are ready to move forward on that. And I would like to make a request of staff here with this, is that it would certainly be helpful, I think, to the industry if you could send out an announcement that the rule was adopted on such and such a date, and here's what it is.
Yeah.
Some of these people, believe it or not, in a year and a half weren't following this as closely, and I would just hate to see somebody run afoul of it.
I mean, it should be standard practice that when we adopt a rule that because we always figure out who it impacts, that we just notify them when it gets adopted, right?
Yeah, we tend to, I'll double check that we did it for this.
But on this particular rule, it would certainly be appreciated.
Yeah.
We've also been an active participant in the transition of reclaim facilities into command and control, and that's ongoing. We've been monitoring from what I guess staff would consider a respectable distance, the AB 617 community steering committee meetings.
Respectable distance, if I remember correctly, in San Bernardino, you were sitting right next to me.
That's why I said respectable.
Not on top of me, but next to me.
We've been monitoring those, taking notes. And then finally, we had the pleasure of meeting with the new EPA regional administrator and the field office director of the LA office of EPA. I think it was October 25th or something. We hosted a meeting for them. There were around 35 members attending, alliance members attending. We just wanted to really get a feel for what his vision is of EPA's role in air and water quality and toxic issues at their level versus what's going on here in California, what he sees now and going forward. So it was very helpful. We've agreed to have at least one, possibly two meetings next year in the spring, and probably locally to repeat that process and discuss some of the issues that we did here in October, so that's my report.
Okay, thank you, Bill. Environmental justice and AB 617 implementation, as if we hadn't heard enough of AB 617 implementation. But Kurt?
Well,
What do we have?
and a report on greenhouse gas proceed spending priorities. At the October 25th CARB board meeting, they, I believe they approved the staff's proposed recommendation for investment priorities for 2018, 2019. There's about $455 million involved. $200 million of that they're proposing will go to what Dan was mentioning, the clean vehicle rebate project. Another $75 million would be going to the transportation equity projects. Then $125 million for heavy duty vehicles and off-road equipment would get about $180 million, $125 million for clean truck and bus vouchers, which would be divided among hybrid, zero emission, and low NOx with renewable fuel. And then $55 million for freight equipment demonstration and pilot commercial deployment for these clean vehicles. Then there's another tranche of money from their AQIP appropriation, $28.6 million. But these are kind of the broad categories. You can download the complete report from CARB's website.
Okay, great. Thank you. Do we have any comments, questions, updates? I mean, that was a bit on the climate change activities, but David's not here. Anyone else have anything on climate change? Okay, you guys can all see that lunch has arrived. Any general comments on subcommittee status reports? Anyone on the phone? Anyone at the table? Anyone behind the velvet rope? All right, we can move on to item 9, which is report to and from Stationary Source Committee. Dr. Fine.
Just real quickly, in October, Stationary Source Committee has been jam-packed. So in October, we heard 1469, which finally passed on our last board meeting in November. 1146 series of rules, landing rules for the reclaim transition. That's still scheduled for December hearing. 1118.1, which we, while we did set hearing, did we not set hearing? I'm trying to remember how it went. We did set hearing, but we ended up delaying 30 days anyway. So we're not going to hear that in December. It'll be January. We sent out announcements of that. There's some last minute cleanup that we're working on. We did not get to our reclaimed quarterly report, but at least there is a report for people to look at there. In November, and this is available, since this is only 2 days from now, Stationary Source will hear an update on 1407.1. Again, at the November board meeting, there was an alternative approach to rulemaking that we think has promised to get us the testing that we need, and we'll report back on that. 1403 is an update to our asbestos rule. AB 617 BART implementation schedule. One of the other requirements of AB 617 was by the end of this year to have our board adopt an implementation schedule for BART. So we're doing that with our rule calendar, because that is how we implement BART through rulemaking. But we'll give a separate presentation on that on Friday. 1325, this is a very administrative fix that EPA wants us to do, just fixing a definition, and then again, trying to come back.
I did get the notice, but
You can't make it, right?
No, I can't, but maybe the thing I'm obligated to do will fall through, since the meeting with the assembly member that I'm supposed to meet with that day has fallen through twice already. So I'm not sure.
So it looks like a special stationary source committee meeting. We'll try to keep the agenda as light as we can on December 19th.
So, excuse me, so that's a Wednesday, not a Friday?
Yes, a Wednesday. The mobile source is still scheduled for Friday? No. It's canceled? I don't think anyone told me that.
They should have.
I'll take it off my calendar.
I looked back at for the last, it has not been held in December for the last 7 years, I looked back, so basically understood that.
Is the technology committee's meeting too that day then, or
I
not?
believe that's also.
Everything will be canceled.
Will that also go 10:30 or 10 o'clock?
We don't have, time on stationary?
What is the regular time?
10.
Is it 10:30 for
Yeah.
stationary source?
10:30.
I always forget it. Yeah, mobile source comes first. I have to be here for both, so. All right, so it's 10:30. Any questions or comments on the update on stationary source committee? None? Okay, then item 10 is the approval of our meeting schedule. It's the same schedule we have been meeting every other month, starting January through November. I don't think there's any problems with those unless Bill Quinn was here to tell us that Steve is meeting. Let's check on that, because I know I have that in my calendar. July 10th. No, that's okay. SIS is next week. Or no, SIS is 2 weeks after that. Okay, so that's good for Bill Quinn, and those of us who attend that conference. So, hearing no objections, no comments from the public. I think we'll consider that approved, barring some other development. But let's consider this approved for the meeting schedule, and move on to agenda item number 11, which are the goals and objectives, which I think several of you have helped put together this year. Do we have questions, comments? Do we need to go over them specifically? They're in the agenda package. The accomplishments are basically what we've done this year.
Can I make one request? Is that we did this last year. You don't have to do it today, but if you have ideas for in-depth presentations for the next year,
Yeah, let staff know
let us know.
as early as possible so they can line things up. Art, go ahead.
One of the things that is talking to people statewide on this issue is the lack within the Latino community of professionals in the environmental sciences. And so, and basically communities of color, some of the areas. So I'm looking to see what type of internships you may have available, because we're one of the largest scholarship donors for people going for academic achievements, but also the opportunity for people for jobs.
When are the internship programs listed?
I think February, March timeframe for the summer.
Yeah, so we have an annual, we have an internship program which the board members get some set amount of hours. They can nominate people to serve, and so it happens every year. But what happens is the applicants send in their resumes and a cover letter to the district. The district then distributes them to the board members then make those choices. So can we make sure that we get notification? Can you just check on when that starts?
In February.
It's in February, okay. So in February.
So if you can send me something now, and then what I'll do, I'll just distribute it out to
Can you send them a link to the website?
I can send you the link, yeah, but we usually don't make an
It's not
announcement
out of
about
date,
it.
yeah, it won't be up to date until February when
Right.
But
when the
that's
new one
okay,
starts.
because it's just
Yeah.
mindset, everybody.
Yeah, so do that. And then, of course, there are educational opportunities at Cal State LA, UC Riverside, both are doing, a lot of technical science, environmental type educational programs. I think, Irvine is doing a lot with fuel cells and other technologies. At UCLA, you've got the Institute of the Environment, you've got, we're mostly scientists and engineers, you've got their law school with a bunch of environmental professors, you've got the public health department, which has a lot of.
Is there a conference or anything that deals with those type of?
USCS, same thing with public health. Is there a single conference that does that? No, not that I know of.
I mean, we've from time to time put on a very large event for like high school students.
And given the difficulty we've had actually to find and staff up, we should probably start thinking about that, right? To get more front and center in people's minds, because it's competitive out there for, with 3% unemployment rate, and we have job openings.
Well, one of the things is that we've started in Santa Ana, a pathways of different programs in health and other things from because they're a unified, all the way to the,
Would it be
college.
HR staff?
Up to to Rancho, which is a 2-year college. So one of the things is we're looking at other programs, because friends of mine are the ones that are, and they've implemented a lot of the programs we went trying to do for the last 20 years. And we're working with labor on their programs.
So what would the best thing would it be for him to put together what's out there and you pass it along to?
Sure, I can pass it on to HR. We've been doing a little bit more on the recruitment front because we have so many openings and visiting some of those job fairs. We have our internship program, sometimes even outside of that board member internship program, if there's a promising person who's been able to.
Well, and also, if you know if there's any programs, like Palaway had one for students in high school for health. Lubac,
Some of the interns are high school students, most are college. Most are college students, but some of them are actually high school students.
Yeah, so if you know any pathway programs that are out there, that we could use for model.
Send me what you're looking for. I'll get it to our HR department. They track this stuff a little bit.
Okay. Thanks, Art. That's a good suggestion. Okay, anything else on the goals and objectives? Anyone have any changes, recommendations, anything? You consider those approved too? Okay.
What do you think, bro?
That brings us to other business. Anyone have any items under other business?
I have one
Yes.
possible thing, but I want to ask Ann first. Ann, I sent you some emails about whether or not we could show a video. Is that something you could do? I sent you a link.
I don't recall seeing that.
I mean, like during the meeting, so if you have.
Oh, during the meeting.
Yeah.
Not my desk.
No, so, okay.
You can't get your,
No, I don't.
You can't.
well, can we plug in his laptop to our system? We want to download everything that's in it.
Whisper objects.
No, I mean, seriously though, can we hook up his laptop to his video to the projector?
Yeah, if you know how to do it.
I don't know if
You don't know if you can?
yeah, I don't think I can.
Oh.
Well, let me just, it's kind of off agenda anyway, I just thought it'd be kind of fun to look at, but let me just tell you what it is and then you can go look at it. We've been working with a pro bono client called the Ocean Cleanup that's developed a passive system to collect plastics out of the oceans for the last
Get rid of all those
couple of
islands.
years. Pardon me?
Get rid of all those islands that are floating out there.
Right, right. And we just, in this sort of self-congratulatory, but we just learned today that my team at Latham won an award that we give every year for outstanding pro bono service, and we have thousands of pro bono matters that we take on every year, so it's a big deal. And they put out a really slick video that's less about patting ourselves on the back and more just about showing what the Ocean Cleanup is doing and how the system works, and so it's really interesting. So you can, if you go to the Latham website, you'll see it there.
Or can you just share the link with everyone?
Yeah, I'll do that.
And it's just something that I think people here, given their interests, would be interested in seeing.
Congratulations.
So, thanks.
Okay, any other business? Okay, hearing none, public comment? We're waiting. All right, anyone on the phone, public comment? None? All right, that'll wrap us up. We will adjourn, and our next meeting scheduled for January 9th here at CCA. Please help yourself to lunch, and thank you everyone on the phone. We will see you next time. Bye.